Welcome to Weber Brothers panel talk. Today we are going to have two of our brothers present some information on Black Wall Street, and not just Black Wall Street in the sense of what you may have heard about Oklahoma only, but Black Wall Street as it pertains to the economic structures that Black people had across America, period, may not have known about. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe Lawson and Demakisa Davis, and they're going to go into it.
Okay. Greetings. How you doing, everyone? Again, this is Brother Joe Lawson. Again, the topic is mainly about Black Wall Street, but it's also talking about thriving Black communities that you might not have known that was taking place during a time when they said Blacks wasn't doing much, and just to kind of dispel a lot of the fallacies of what our conditions were before the civil rights movement and before integration and all those type of conversations were going on, that there were some thriving, really thriving communities that was predominantly all Black. We definitely shared a video earlier. I guess we'll get with Dr. D. We're going to kind of show that video to give you an opportunity to just see some of the things that was talking about, like he said, in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, dealing with Black Wall Street, but it was other places that was also at that level before and after that particular time, and what happened to these communities. Are they here today? Are they gone? So we're going to get into a little bit of that. If y'all have the video, we can kind of go into the video a little bit, and then we can kind of discuss it after the fact.
Okay. The video does an excellent job of illustrating on during that time, from our perspective as well as from the Caucasians' perspective. You just get a great idea of how it all happened and what was going through their minds and all that, and how amazing it was, what we had going on back in the day. Also, like Brother Joe was saying, there were Black Wall Streets all throughout the country. Matter of fact, one of the first ones, I shouldn't even say one of the first ones, the first one was actually in North Carolina. And North Carolina was the first one actually to fail. Or I shouldn't say fail, it was attacked. So this thing was, it just went on throughout the nation. We would build, and then all of a sudden, they would come along and destroy it. But we can get started now.
How much of this you going to play, Dr. I see it's 26 minutes.
It's 26 minutes. So what we can do is, I'd like to kind of go a little, we could start the first 5 minutes and then,
just let me know,
and then we can fast forward.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's do it like that.
Can you hear it now?
It was back.
Yes.
You can't hear it now?
Yes.
Okay, Joe, can you hear it too?
We had congressmen and
Yeah, I'm trying to go back to it. Down. Give me 1 second.
government.
J-Dub, I know you got me muted. Yeah.
But the night riders.
Yes, I can hear it.
Okay, Dr. Moss, I don't. You can hear it?
Said we don't want no niggas.
I can hear you. I can't hear it though.
You can't hear the video?
We don't want no
No.
niggas in high political office. So they killed us. They hung us. They burned us.
How is that?
And when they got in trouble, they called us again to fight in a Jim Crow army. Some of the older ones here that were in World War I, you fought Germany. But the German prisoners of war were treated better than the Black soldiers who fought for America against Germany. Talk to me. Hitler rose again. World War II. Black men died at Pearl Harbor. Black men died in Guadalcanal, in the Solomon Islands, in the Philippines, at Iwo Jima. Black men died in North Africa fighting the Germans. Black men died at Anzio Beach.
Well, let's just talk through it.
Palermo,
let's talk through it. So, Dr. D, I'm going to let you kind of talk through
to
it.
free Rome,
Right now,
to free Paris, to free Europe.
But I don't know that I really want to.
Damn it!
Listen.
We died.
more content, but I'll let you.
And America has rebuilt Germany and Japan, and the nigger.
Go ahead and pause it real quick, Justin.
Okay. So you say you were trying to fast forward that?
No, Doc D told me to pause it because I thought he was going to talk. So I'm trying to let him go.
No, go ahead and pause it. I want to get through that portion of it. Basically, what Farrakhan's covering is just our contributions to America. And that during that period of time, we're talking about contributing in war and fighting next to the Caucasian and doing all these things and then coming back home and not being allowed or not being able to have the same opportunities. And just breaking that down, like, which was really good. But I kind of want to get to the nitty gritty of what we're all here to do, which is to talk about Black Wall Street. So just a moment. Go ahead and follow up, Joe, as soon as I find this thing.
Okay. Well, this is what I wanted to kind of talk about. You mentioned like one of the earlier, like you said, it was a couple communities and a couple cities and a couple areas where Black Wall Street took place, and that's fine because I mean we're getting into the start of what happened even before Tulsa, Oklahoma. You had Durham, North Carolina, which, if I'm not mistaken, it was around the time of if I'm not mistaken, it's around in 1905. I was trying to get my notes together. Then I had another video on the app that was talking about Durham, North Carolina, and how that particular city was thriving, and what really took place. They set out to basically remove that city, destroy that city.
America.
I'm apologizing for some reason. This YouTube thing, I'm trying to
and live inside of a 35.
So I apologize.
So you're absolutely fine. And basically, it's talking about how these cities that were thriving in America without white America, okay, they were self-reliant. They didn't get anything from the government. They didn't get any kind of assistance.
Cannibals, all that kind of stuff. So it's like what happens, I think what Dr. Moss is saying is that implanted, in a way subconsciously, you kind of take on what people project on you. One other example might even be a lot of times, and this happens a lot overseas, right? So you'll talk to people who don't live in America, and you ask them what their impression of Black people are, the Black American. Their understanding of a Black American is like, oh, they're all criminals, they're all this, they're all that. Well, why? Well, because in all the movies, what do we play? We play a villain, we play somebody who takes on these certain types of images, or like you say, a playboy, or he's a gangster, he's a this, so it's always that. So subconsciously, we even start to embrace those stereotypes with, like Dr. Moss is saying, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we carry ourselves. And then ultimately, and I think this is what you were saying, Justin, is you were trying to say, well, maybe it's an addiction, but I think more so it becomes more of a programming and modeling that we've seen, and we think that that's what we're supposed to do. That's just how I understood what you were saying, Dr. Moss, and you can help me if I'm missing that.
No, you're right on point. Right on point.
Right. I tend to agree with that analysis on that, because when you look at it, most people become what you teach. That's like when we was out here in the community, and if the mother or the family, if you tell a child he's stupid every day, what is that child going to begin to do? He'll begin to believe exactly what you tell him about himself. And not only that, for a long time, not that they say our sexual nature was high and all this is, they also say we were lazy, we was this, we was that.
Yep.
We didn't want to do anything. We just wanted to get a free ride and all these things. And people begin, if you put them in that light long enough, they'll begin to shine what it is that you're placing on them. So I kind of agree with what you're saying in that situation.
So there was
but at
one
the end
other
of the
thing. I'm sorry.
it's up to us to choose to make that choice on what whether we're gonna accept it or not. You know what I'm saying? Because it's always, what's the old saying? It's always an exception to every rule.
Right.
And sometimes we gotta want to be the exception, and that exception got to become the norm.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't want to negate anything you said. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Sorry about my hands.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, I agree with everything. It's just, I think that with every issue that we come across, I mean, I have this newfound appreciation for balance. And sometimes, like I said, I think that with some of the internalized racism is one part of it, but being able to take advantage of those images. Like these entertainers, hip hop artists, being able to take advantage of those images and making it work, and being able to give back to the community and doing some of the things that they do. You know, and we got incredible examples of that, right? From Colin Kaepernick to, J. Cole, or, all these other hip hop artists that stuff for the community. So there's two sides to every situation. And the thing that I would like to encourage us to start doing, we can talk about the negative, but then what's the spin on? What's the other side to the coin where, we as a people can take advantage of that and make it work for us?
Sure. Now, I don't want to get too far off the topic, because what we were talking about, remember we started kind of with Black Wall Street. I was trying to talk a little bit about the 4 things that Joe said really brought about the demise of the different communities that are representative of Black Wall Street. So the first one was family. And the only thing I wanted to add to that, and thank you everybody for your input, the only other thing I wanted to add to that family part, and this was just about the family dissension, how it was broken up, were the laws. And what happened during that time, remember, is Black men were jailed at a very high rate for crimes that didn't even make sense a lot of times, right? And we see that on the special 13th, but what I was getting back to is that really broke up our families, right? Because now you have people that have families and the dads were gone for 5, 10, 15 years or whatever they did, sometimes even killed, right? For crimes that shouldn't even been crimes. So that was that part I just wanted to add for the family structure of how it was broken down. The next thing, Joe, you mentioned was faith. You want to dig into that at all with faith, of how that broke down those communities?
We can touch on faith, because faith goes far beyond just religion. Where I would like to go with that whole faith part is, when we had that faith, it was not just faith in God, but it was faith in each other. It was faith in self, that we were somebody. We were of a higher being, because we still were closer to our roots at that time. And when they began to twist our faith and they began to institute more religion more than spirituality and faith, then we began to get further off path, to me. Because now you have men that's being, and don't take this wrong, anybody that goes to church and anything like that, but this whole institution of religion is no different. It's a part that's being played in our community to have some of these Black leaders in these churches to kind of keep us in a subdued state of mind and a subdued state of being, to be subservient unto certain beings. You know what I'm saying? And they're using religion to do such things sometimes, not all the time, but it has happened. But when our faith was still based on the spirituality of self and being connected with the universe and connected with God and having that connection with, each other, we did better. We did better. And that's just, when I say our faith caused us to also divide, because we understand that when you do denomination, and basically, let me kind of say it like this here. You have all these churches, and all these churches saying that they believe in Christ and they believe in this and it's one God, da, da, da. So why is it that we have 1,000,001 churches in one area? That's another mechanism just to divide the people against itself. And that's kind of how I look at it. So when you understand from a mathematical equation, they say division is to do what? Is to divide. So when you say you have a denomination, what are you doing? You're dividing the people. And now if you divide the people 1,000,000 times, what do you have? You basically have a non-existent people that's not unified.
Okay. So anybody want to add to that? Thoughts on that?
Well, this is Dr. D. I think that what I see in terms of that faith aspect is that when you have something that's real, you always have an imitation that pops up. So, right? So you wouldn't have an imitation if the thing wasn't real. So to me, my faith is based on my relationship with Christ, and that is real. And I know there's always going to be imitations. Now it's up to me to figure out and to decipher where the imitation is and stay away from that. So I think that so often people kind of fall prey to the imitation and never get the real thing.
I say in respect to Black Wall Street, I tend to agree with you, Joe, in that I think that we were allowed to have, so first of all, right, if you look at faith, right, it started out where, like you said, when we were slaves, we'll go there. We were kind of forced into a certain type of religion, and we had to kind of preach what we were told. And then we kind of came out of that. We were kind of forced into a religion and spirituality. And I think over time, what happened is, I think as people, quite honestly, I think a lot of people that just wanted to be leaders. So they allowed them to start as many churches as they wanted to. And you find out that churches were actually epicenters of communities, right? They were a lot of times the only places where they could go get loans, where they could go, it really was the epicenter of the Black community was really the church. And it's really one of the only places that people had voices and had some power. And as those communities. So I think to your point, as it started to kind of get watered down, as imitations jumped up, right, Dr. Moss, as everyone was allowed to have their own interpretation versus maybe the original interpretation, it started to get kind of watered down. And so you ended up with a bunch of divisions, as Joe said, and everybody's going in the opposite direction. And I think that really goes into the last part of the 4, which was the whole unity piece. Do you want to talk anything about the 40? Oh, before we get off of faith, did anybody else have anything of how our faith was interrupted and so thus our community separated? Anybody else want to add anything to that? All right, so fortitude. Does everybody know what fortitude means?
Let's get into this. I always like to read the definition when you talk about fortitude. Well, you know why I say that.
Well, I always say it because you used it, and I don't know if everybody knows the definition of fortitude. I don't really know. I'll be that guy that'll say it. I tell you what, you want to look up the definition of fortitude, and we'll come back to it, and we'll talk about unity, of how unity kind of messed up the community. And the reason why I'm going through these 4 is because I think a lot of us understand what we were talking about with the whole construct of Black Wall Street, with the whole construct of our communities being self-sufficient, independent, where our Black dollar lasted in our communities for, up to a year sometimes. So I think, to Justin J. Dub's point, we're talking about problems, but I think sometimes understanding what we see as the problem and kind of unpacking it can help us come up with the solution. So from a unity perspective, the first thing I said, I think with that faith, right? Because at one point, I think we all kind of had the same faith, right? So we all had the same faith. We were all kind of believing in the same direction. And I think a lot of our faith, when we really think about it, has a lot to do with our value system, right? Because a lot of times that's what the construct creates, is a value system that we kind of live our life based on.
Very true.
Right. Do you want to add anything to that, Dr. D?
I just think that, we have our faith. We have our value system, but the people that attacked us back then and did what they did, what was their faith? What was their value system? And I just think we missed the point. We're having this assumption that they got the same values or the same views as we have. But, that's a bad assumption. I think there's just some things that we're going to have to really, really look at these churches and how far have they taken us? Over the decades.
Well, sure. And I think, and I don't want to go too deep down that path, because I know we all have different thoughts and ideas about religion. I don't want to make it a religious conversation per se. But I think Dr. Moss probably said it best, where we can kind of nip that part in the bud, is that you have a lot of imitations, right? And I do believe that spirituality is very personal. I think religion is a way to express your spirituality. You have to kind of go what works for you. But I will agree that to what you're saying, Doc Davis, because I think you're completely right. When you hear somebody say they're a Christian, it comes with an assumption that they have a value system, right? And if you think about it, a lot of those people that, quote unquote, founded or, colonized, cultivated the United States came under the auspice of being Christians, right? But I know my Christian values as I grew up on, there were these things called the 10 Commandments, and I remember one of those 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, right? That was one of the first things as Christians they did, and tried to validate it, or find a way to validate it.
So I think it's important, though, to recognize that we can't judge the principle by the people who try to follow the principle incorrectly.
Fair enough. I agree.
I was going to add something to it, and it's just something I learned from my dad. Somebody with a military perspective, and one of the things he would talk about is that the other side, whoever the adversary is, goes in there with this perspective of, we do whatever we do to achieve whatever we need to achieve by any means, and later on we can ask for forgiveness, and then we go into this with this assumption that God's going to take care of it for us, that they're going to have to answer to God. And, so here it is, we're all extinct and they ain't got nothing, and they got something. We really just have to kind of look at some of this stuff, because these are the tactics that they play by. This is what they go by.
I hear you.
It was just funny that you said, because when we talk about faith, what I go to is one of the things that you said. It's about principles, and it's about principles and philosophies, but it's really about more principles. And I remember a long time ago when you used to talk to an older black guy, an older black man. What was the first thing he said? I know what my father used to say, especially even now when I got older. He used to be like, Bubba, it's about the principle. This is where we, when you look at faith and you look at any mechanism as far as that, and when you're dealing with masonry, are you dealing with religion, are you dealing with anything that's here to educate and growth of self, it's all about the principles and values that you feel in yourself that allow you to either achieve or not achieve. And this is where I think our principles were compromised. Why, faith was such a big deal because it went to the.
I'm gonna kind of keep pushing this as we got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So fortitude is courage and pain and adversity. And so why is that a reason why the communities that we had were broken up? So in other words, was it a lack of fortitude? Is that what it was? Like we didn't have the courage in the face of the pain or adversity?
Yes, I would just say yes, simply because when they wanted to destroy the moral fiber of the community, even back during the slavery time, they put the woman through an immense amount of pain. Okay, they put her through an immense amount of pain, and where her courage was shaken, because again, the woman was a nurturer. So to see the husband or the child killed before their own eyes, that was pain, and she wanted to evade that pain as much as possible. So therefore, she instilled in the men that was coming up during that time to say, "Look, do not buck this, do not do this, do not that." So in that say, you breeded a weaker man. So again, I would say yes. During the time of a lack of courage, in the time of pain and adversity, that's the time when you got to dig deep and say, okay, I'm willing to go through whatever it is I need to go through, because it's about the principles. It's about the end result of what's going to happen if I don't.
Okay, so I'm only gonna, because Dr. Davis brought this up.
Okay.
He was talking about basically, I'm gonna use his turn. I think I'm gonna just say that what he was talking about was kind of turn the other cheek. So basically he was saying, at what point do you stop turning the other cheek because you look back and you have nothing, right? And I think fortitude is really kind of lives there, right? From the standpoint that we say, hey, we got a set of values. And our values, no matter what, say, we aren't going to act this way. Whatever that way is, we aren't going to do it. Even if it means for the better of this or the better of that, we have a set of values that says we are not. And we'll die for those values. Is there a line that you just say is no more? You kind of understand what I'm saying? When I'm hearing this, right, and I'm just trying to picture myself living in those communities at that time, right? I think what happened with regard to, when we talk about fortitude is that we did, so we said we had an attack on the family. We kind of talked about the attack on the family. We had an attack on our faith, right? Which had a separation. And our attack on our fortitude, which initially would have said we had courage when there was pain, courage when there was issues. To your point, Joe, it got to a point, I think, where parents said, you know what, I don't want to see my baby die. So when this happens, just don't say nothing. Just keep your mouth shut. Just don't do it. And because of that, we didn't stand up for our ground. We didn't stand our ground. Rosewood, as an example, right? And so we didn't get the respect. We didn't keep our land. We didn't keep our community. Is that maybe a way I think maybe we can look at fortitude is how it really kind of separated that? I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, because I just want to get to the last one, unity, before we get off.
That kind of sums it up. I mean, it goes into a little bit more with fortitude, but I think that's it in a nutshell so far.
Anybody else want anything with that fortitude?
I do think because we, when we're talking about the Black experience, and I, it's one of the things that makes me really frustrated with our people is that we take on this, the Black woman suffered, the Black man should have been there. And actually, it's all of us suffered. All of us had. Okay, it was an attack on all of us. Okay, we all played a part in it, and we gotta get off of that stuff because we don't have the luxury to do any of that at all.
No, I think we were just using that as an analogy to talk about certain, talk about the courage that the woman.
I know what you're saying. I do know what you're saying, but it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it so many times. to the point that it's no longer an analogy. There's something to it. Why it's not just being brought up here; it's being brought up. This narrative is being brought up throughout, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is not a complete narrative because the black man also suffered. The black man also had pain. Okay, what is with all this?
No. So what, maybe I think we're getting a little off a tangent. So what we're saying?
No, I'm just saying with the whole. I'm just talking about all the things that has kind of gotten us to where we are right now. And I think when we start doing these things, it takes us off topic and really takes us away from what the other issues are. As a whole, we're suffering as a people. We got to take it like that.
So this is what I'm saying. I'm trying to keep this in line with Black Wall Street, right? So what we're saying is Black Wall Street, which we're going to just say now, when we say Black Wall Street, what I'm referring to are Black communities that were self-sustaining around the United States. And what Joe brought up was, he said there were 4 factors that essentially brought about the end of our Black communities. So the first one was family, and it's basically an attack on our family. And we just were making observations of what we thought were the attacks on the family. The next was the attack on our faith. And we talked of those examples. And all we were trying to do with fortitude was just talk about the examples of how our fortitude was infringed on, which was our strength, right? Strength in the face of pain and adversity. And all we were saying is that during that time, there was so much pain going on, and you're right, it was men and women. Just one of the examples was just the pain women saw. I mean, once again, it's a saying Black men too. I mean, the Black man on the plantation was the one who beat the other slaves, right? So there had to be some pain in him having to beat another Black man and tell him, hey, just don't do this no more. I don't want to have to beat you. I mean, that literally would happen. Come on, man, you know I want to beat you. Just stop doing that, right? So in a lot of ways, so I don't want to get so caught up on man versus women and Black women. It's just what we're saying is that all of our abilities to be able to stand up in the face of was infringed on. That's all. And that was part of the reason why our communities suffered, because we didn't have Black Panthers to stand up and say, this is what we're going to do. Instead, our Black Panthers were looked at as being terrorists, right? And going into communities and messing up the community, all kind of bad stuff versus what the Black Panthers really were, which were trying to build our communities. But when Black people now talk about the Black Panthers, they're looked at as being these monsters. And there's another word I want to use, but terrorist isn't the word, but they use a very strong word to describe the Black Panthers.
When these Caucasians came back from the war and they came back over, there were no jobs. But what they were seeing was that Blacks had better jobs and things were just going great, and so they're looking at this and they're saying, what the hell? What the hell? No, we're going to stop this,
Mm-hmm. This is our country. This is our land.
Yeah, this is our country. Yeah, exactly. Who the hell? When did this all go down?
Just because you went to go fight in Vietnam and this, that, and the other don't make you equal.
That's right. That's right. So like Dr. Ma was saying in the beginning, he was saying that, we have to stop using them as their standard of where we're at.
How about that?
Yeah.
Them as the standard.
But isn't religion part of that? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, what you're saying. Think about it like this, and I mean this seriously. And I'm like, and it's like I said, I don't ever want to bash anybody's religion, this and the other.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just bad interpretation, right?
Yeah, I agree.
But even going down to how they used to use the Bible to justify slavery, and it was the whole descendants of Abraham, right? Mm-hmm. And the dark skin, because who had the baby with Sarah because she was dark, and originally it's because his wife couldn't have a baby, his original wife. So back then they were allowed to have kind of whatever. So supposedly the Lord told him he could have baby. But the short of the long is the darker baby was considered the curse, and that's the way they preached out of their Bible. And so they always wanted to preach that this dark skin is curse. But I'm gonna tell you, the funniest this is, I was actually doing. I don't know if you guys have seen this or not. But I was doing I went in a rabbit hole, and I know I'm off topic. I jumped in a rabbit hole.
Are you on?
Black Chinese. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you really, when you get stuck in that rabbit hole, and this is stuff you and I, the three of us on this call all know about.
Yes.
The fact that we as Black people can produce anything, right? So
that's right.
People can make what's called an albino. Now, not everybody has that albino trait, meaning every Black person, but there's no white people that have any trait that can create anything Black. Now, what you find,
that's right,
when those two albinos, or an albino and even a Black, have babies, there's a strong possibility that albino characteristic is strong. So now what you start to get is you start to get just the straight hair, the lighter skin, all that kind of stuff. So what you really start to find out is in Black cultures, when that albino would appear, they used to have there was something wrong with them.
That's right.
All right. So
deficiency.
So if you can think about how that worked out, right? Albino babies would be born and they'd be killed. I mean, it makes sense. But then you got to start thinking from a mom's perspective. No, this is my baby. I love it. You can't kill my baby. So now what starts to happen, you start getting cultures and communities of albinos. And this is literally what happened. And these albino communities, they move, they go to different areas, and it's literally, and you start to get the different shades of people, which is why you can look at these Japanese, Chinese, whatever. I can show you this video of this that we saw earlier. I don't know if you guys wrote it or not, about this Vietnamese, the China people, I know what it was, the China people in Mississippi, on the Delta. And it's funny looking at these Chinese people, and you're like, listen to their accents, and they sound like just straight down home country folk. No accent of Chinese in them. And you're like, whoa, you look like this and what, right? Looking at their silhouettes, you start saying, man, you could be Black. You could be anything. Especially when they don't come out with that, going back. It's back to the faith thing. I know I went on a hard tangent. Like you said, we allow their standards to become ours. And we begin to embrace the standards that they have. Sorry, I was so long on that.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. And it's so, the whole thing is so complicated. I mean, with people that suffer from albinism, albinos, and then just the last, 2 years? I think it was 3 years with the findings that what they found with, Neanderthal DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they ran the study, what they found was that we have the least to none at all of Neanderthal DNA. And of course, Caucasians have the most. And so they were wondering why this was and what was going on. And so it was really fascinating how they were breaking it down. But for generations, they've always pushed that we are the least of Homo sapien.
Right.
Okay. Homo sapien sapien. Now, because of that, it's showing that actually we actually are the most perfect form of the Homo sapien sapien.
Yep.
And that's something that's huge.
Yeah. If I remember that study was like in Australia or something. It was like, I remember.
Yeah.
It was like an Australian white woman. Yeah.
That's right.
Just for, because we're recording everything's sake.
Just
trying to get back to unity then, right? So we talked about fortitude, and the last part would be unity, and how unity was disrupted amongst our communities. What examples, or how would you say unity was disrupted in those communities, Joe?
And what I was thinking, they were talking about unity. We're going to, of course, go for this for a brief moment. That's about, they say that the money circulated to the community anywhere from 36 times to 100 times. That's the sense of unity. As a community, they unify together. They're working with one another, and they're spending money with one another. That was just the working together, the teamwork, and to supporting one another. All that was disrupted because they breed a distrust amongst his brother or his sister. Oh, you can't trust him, or you can't trust him. You see what I'm saying? And then they begin, and again, it goes into programming. They breeded that sense of distrust. You know what I'm saying? Which caused us to kind of disengage with one another. And here we go where the moral, the line of unity is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
As we kind of speak on that, the plumb line was taken out. The level was smashed and destroyed. The square was just thrown away because we no longer squared our actions with one another. We no longer met one another on the level. You know what I'm saying? We no longer acted upon the plumb with one another.
You know what I'm gonna say?
And I'm kind of throwing these things out.
I understand. I know, and I'm trying to let it go. But I'm
right.
Because not everybody may understand exactly what you're getting at. But what I will say is this.
I threw that out there because that was biblical. Because when you remember when God, just from a biblical standpoint, dealing with the people, that's into the Bible, he said he will put that plumb line in there to always remember that connection, to act upon that with each other. You know what I'm saying? He set that plumb line between him and I, and the community and I. You see what I'm saying? So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say is that just along the lines of what Dr. Davis was talking about, just from the standpoint of taking on a lot of their ways and everything, one thing that I look at is just the whole capitalistic perspective. And he really took on capitalism in its crony state. Let's put it like that. We took over its crony capitalism state and forgot about our socialistic views, because as Black people, we were very social. We believed in the village, right? That was our thing, is we believed in the village. And what happened is when we started taking on those capitalistic ways, part of those capitalistic ways, which broke that unity, right, was, well, this product isn't as good, right? We need the white product, right? We need this. And like you say, that whole divide and conquer kind of aspect, they came in and divided our communities by making us feel like we could be better and that we should be better. And these communities were holding us down, and if we wanted to, just all those types of things, instead of what used to be, it became a very big self-preservation thing versus the understanding that, high tide raises all boats versus just worrying about your boat being raised. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's where we really lost it, is that instead of making sure we all had high tide and we all were surviving, we started really having a self-preservation thing where it was like, man, we can't worry about them. We got to worry about our store. We got to worry about this. We got to worry about our own. And we forgot our own, actually our own people, not just our own family.
Right. And they did that with segregation. They did that with integration.
Integration, right.
When they got rid of segregation. What was that?
No. I think you're 100% right.
Right, because it says here, it says during the Reconstruction time, they survived being vital in the Black community until segregation was overturned by the feds in 1950, in the 1960s. So what they're saying, long as we were separate but equal, we thrived. But they knew that. They knew that, look, we got to get rid of segregation because these Black communities are thriving without us. And they're surpassing us. They're more wealthier than we are. And not only that, they're happier than we are. You see what I'm saying? We got to get rid of them.
They're getting smarter. They're getting better jobs. They can think. They're creating their own economy. And I think still at the biggest side of it is that crony capitalism piece, which is we aren't getting their dollar. So we aren't getting rich and they aren't getting poor.
Right.
And then Dr. D brought up before, and you guys talked about, and then when you start introducing the systems where people can get social services, you start introducing the social services, right? And now we really become dependent on you. So not only did I take away your economy, I take away your communities and everything, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you the handout. Don't eat it, hook, line, and sinker. Now we have generations that are bought up in the system and they stay in the system. Social service.
Right. Yep.
So that was, I think, definitely the unity. So what I'm going to do is, now that we went over those four, and I apologize, Doc Davis, because I know I took you way off your script. And if you want to, we can shoot back to the video and you can kind of figure out a way to kind of close it up, you know what I mean? And then we can start it back. And this is really for the sake of the fact that we're recording. We'll have 3 parts, and we'll just kind of a 3-part on Black Wall Street. So.
Yeah. So getting back into the video, one of the big reasons why I wanted everybody to check this out is because it gives a perspective. It gives their perspective of also why they did what they did, their justification.
Yeah, their justification for what they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're always focused on ourselves and how we feel and all this kind of stuff. But it's a good idea to just see what's going on in their heads, because then that may change our strategy.
Okay.
If you guys know what I mean.
Was it here at the 1333?
Yeah, we can go ahead and go right there.
Became so successful
I hear it now.
and vibrant
Yes.
that during his visit, Booker T. Washington dubbed it as the, quote, Negro Wall Street.
Is this where you want
Having
to
their own bus line and
Yeah,
2 high
yeah.
schools, a hospital, 2
For about 4 minutes.
2 theaters, 3 drugstores, 4 hotels, a public library, and 13 churches. In addition to that, there were over 150 2 to 3 story brick commercial buildings that housed clothing and grocery stores, cafes, rooming houses, nightclubs, and a large number of professional offices hosted by black doctors, lawyers, and dentists. Tulsa's progressive black community had some of the city's most elegant brick houses and mansions in all of Oklahoma, completely well furnished with china, fine linens, beautiful furniture, and even grand pianos.
Anybody who wishes for the good old days probably doesn't remember what the good old days were really like. Because in 1921, the nation suffered coast to coast from hate, discrimination, arrogance, and those were probably the underlying reasons. They manifested themselves in organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. But you can't blame the riot on 1 or 2 or 3 specific incidents. The environment what caused it. You have to keep in mind that in 1921, the majority of the Oklahoma legislature were Klansmen. Almost every city and county official in Tulsa County, Oklahoma, was elected with either support of the Klan or they were Klansmen themselves. In those days, the Klan would have parades in downtown Tulsa, wearing their white sheets and their pointy little hats to fit their pointy little heads. That would last 4 to 5 hours in length. Now visualize the number of people that were involved in a parade that would last 4 to 5 hours. And all these people came from Tulsa. When you had a parade in Tulsa, a lot of people come in from other counties. But you also have to remember that 1925, there were 1 million card-carrying Ku Klux Klansmen in this country. So what was going on in Tulsa was probably the same thing that was going on in an awful lot of other cities. And if the riot hadn't happened in Tulsa, it probably would have happened someplace else. The difference between Tulsa and some other city is that we know how bad it got. And where we've gone since then has been a mark of our progress. Has been a mark of our progress. Has been a mark of our progress.
You can pause right there, Justin.
Okay.
Okay.
What's up? Just paused.
Yeah, and then we're going to follow. This next piece is real important. But just to kind of give you an idea, again, of where we weren't just in these buildings that showed up and set up business. We built these buildings. So we controlled every aspect of our own economy. So we didn't depend on them, like Joe said, for Nathan. Nothing.
Right.
Got anything to add, Joe?
Not only just that, it was the trade lines of doing business with other places. We wasn't just doing business here. That's what made Black Wall Street so great, because they did open up the other trade lines and were doing business outside of America that even white America hadn't even tapped into.
Mm-hmm.
This showed them, how remarkable they are, how astute and on that level that they were able to go ahead and create these trade lines outside of America for the benefit of their community and themselves.
I didn't even think about that part of it, Joe. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, man.
You start creating business and commerce outside the country, then you really don't need them, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
The whole mindset of within but without.
Yep. All
You can
right,
go ahead and play when you're ready.
Okay, here we go.
Of white men coming back from World War I, bringing back Souvenir Lewis, Spandau, and Browning submachine guns, and a variety of other weapons that they brought back from the battlefield. And then they can't find jobs. And the power structure within the city at that time, as was occurring in other cities, would enlist them in the Ku Klux Klan and blame their problems on Jews, African Americans, and Catholics.
Well, I didn't know Catholics were in there.
It's time for you to in a new truck from Crown Buick GMC.
All right, I just wanted to stop there.
You know me, I think they had to throw that in there. I found that kind of funny when you said I didn't know Catholics was in there. Yeah, I didn't either.
And a lot of people in the South don't know the culture and what was going on throughout the rest of the country. A lot of people just know what was down here. But the Catholics had actually, that's why it was such a big deal when JFK got voted as president, because he was Catholic. And back in the day, Catholics used to get the cross burned on their yard. I got elderly patients I had elderly patients that were Irish Catholics that had Klans members out front throwing rocks and burning crosses on their yard. It blew me away when they were telling me about it.
Wow.
And so that's why I kind of try to be careful, because not all white folks are the same, And, like them in their experience, the reason why they're liberal and the reason why they don't seem to have any issues understanding our struggles. When we talk about certain things, there's no issues. Anything is debatable with them because they get it.
When you say they, the only people I know they would be Jews. I know I've had conversations.
Yeah. Well, when I'm talking about Catholics
because I'm gonna tell you, Catholics, I haven't found the same thing with Catholics. Just being honest, and I went to a Catholic college.
That's different. That's a little different.
I understand what you're saying, but I just say they all identify as being Catholic. 90% of them. That's my only point. And because they identify as being Catholic, which, by the way, one thing I don't know, but you might know, Joe. You might even know too, Doc D. But I didn't realize how many Black Catholics there were, because I feel like in Florida, I'm only going to use Florida. This is where I was born and raised, and specifically, I don't know many, if any, Black Catholics, right? Mm-hmm. I know when I went to Indiana, man, there were full Catholic churches that were Black. Not to mention, even when they had their choirs and stuff, it sounded more like a Baptist. So, you're Southern Baptist versus the normal kind of like orchestra kind of, Catholic. So it's interesting that we actually kind of bring up Catholic, because it kind of makes me start thinking about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know why that is, though, because during the time of Constantine and all this, when they was trying to form this whole religious thing and this whole Catholicism thing, they had to go into the Black priests. They really wasn't called Black priests then, but they was on the level of the Black priests to even get themselves. This is during the time of Serapis, when they were trying to Serapis, appeal to the Black priests or the Black
whatever.
Yeah, and get himself ordained as a god and this and that. So the only place they can get that was from the Black holy man at that time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
For the longest time, they would not do it. They would not give him what he wanted. So what he began to do is he began to murder all of them until one finally said, okay, for self-preservation, he did it.
Okay. When I grew up, I knew there was a lot of Black Catholics, and family out in Pennsylvania and stuff. But to be honest, it ain't no different than Black folks being Baptist, Black folks being Methodist, any of that other stuff. It's still Christianity. And so, it just depends on what region of the country you're at, which sect of it is more predominant. And that's all that is.
Very true.
Well, you got to remember what happened now. You remember we had this, and then when they did that and allowed Serapis to come in and do what he did, then they put the whole flip on Christianity and said, okay, outside of this, everything is pagan, and we killing everything that don't align with this.
True.
You see what I'm saying?
So once again, I don't want to get too far down the religion track real quick because I want to stay on Wall Street. So I don't want to get too far. We can do that. You know, we good at that. So I'm gonna go back to the video now that it's back playing, and we'll kind of finish what dude is talking about here.
Catholics. It was a simple answer to a complex problem for simple people. Meanwhile, they could stand in downtown Tulsa and look at the mansions in Little Africa, in the Black Wall Street, and seethe.
During the early morning of May 31st, 1921, a 19-year-old young black...
But I was trying to keep the video on where he wanted you.
I'm here, Justin.
Okay, no, I just didn't know if you wanted to stop the video there.
Oh, no, that I wanted just that part what he was talking about.
Right.
And how they, that part right there. And you see how he described that. So let's go ahead and let's compare that to our response. You can see there's a definite problem. There's a disconnect. We really, even to this, even to the, well, for them, they looked at the solution. They come here and they see us in mansions. They see us in all these things. You know, a lot of this is a cultural thing because you're talking about European immigrants from where they came from and how they handle problems, how they deal with each other, how, you know, and they're bringing a lot of their solutions to another place. And so, and then here it is, we have our certain situations, how we handle things. Okay. And so we really don't know the people that we're dealing with. And so, and even to this day, we're still having these same problems and the same debate, thinking that this particular way is the best way to have dealt with it when that wasn't the best way to have dealt with these things. And you got to really know who you're dealing with before we can even go forward on things. And so with the way they see things is, okay, you guys got everything. We ain't got nothing. And not only are we going to take it away, but we're going to burn all this down that you created. We want it completely wiped out.
All right, so let me unpack a little bit of what I think you're saying. Just want to make sure. Go ahead. So what I think Dr. Davis is trying to say is that the mentality of the settlers that came to this country needs to be understood. And so I think that will probably have to be another video or whatever, another topic of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think so.
The key to understanding what their thought process was in this country was still that of superiority and supremacy. And so if you think about how the video started with these settlers coming over here essentially considering themselves Indian. They created laws that gave them and put them in positions of, once again, supremacy, and or puts them in positions of being able to take advantage of the resources, the wealth of the land. So they created laws that enable them to have those powers, those controls, and so on and so forth. Fast forward a little bit to where time has gone by, and as a group of people, we were able to build something. And what we were able to build in this case was an actual sustainable community. Created that sustainable community, essentially they saw that as a huge threat. And because they saw it as a threat, and it was a threat to what? It was a threat to their supremacy, their dominance, their position in society as tops, as the standard, as we were talking about. They were the standard. And so how could we be equal, and how could they be falling to a place of inferiority? And I don't even want to say necessarily inferiority, but once again, their standard was always money. Their standard was always who owned the land. Their standard was, you know, having the big mansions and everything that, by the way, we used to build on their plantations. So that standard, they couldn't handle us having. And because of that, the tactics that they use to impose their power is one that's very violent. And in a lot of ways, by any means necessary. You coined is using that phrase, although it really describes what they do and what they do. And so I think what kind of the big more of the story is when we even really start talking about the Black Wall Street, I'm gonna let you kind of finish it. It's really understanding, I'm just trying to really say what you said, Dr. Davis, is really understanding who you're dealing with and not expecting to be something that they're not. So with that being said is, in this case, because they were the standard, we wanted to trust and believe that what they were doing, what they were saying was right. And so in that case, whether it's, and I kind of look at even the Catholicism thing kind of the same way. When we moved to the north, we moved to those areas, we became Catholics because we saw them as being of a higher standard. They were the ones maybe living in certain communities, and that became your circle. And because they were Catholic, you became Catholic too. You wanted to go to Catholic schools. I mean, I remember my parents telling me that they went to Catholic school. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking about this now. You used to go to a Catholic school and have nuns hitting you. These were white women hitting you, correcting you as a Black woman. And so in your head now, you're believing that the white way is right, and they can correct you based on their interpretations of their Bible, their rules. So, but kind of getting back to what you were saying, Doc, it's really just understanding who you're dealing with and what their tactics are. And I think in a big picture, why they implement those tactics and their big agenda when they do that. So when we take a look at Black Wall Street as this example, what happened was they recognized that there was a Black society or Black economies popping up all around the world, and their whole thought process of segregation, which, you got to remember, segregation was just really all about trying to demoralize us, right? And really put us in check to help us understand that you aren't as good as we are. So when we were able to now have things that were just as good,
control.
Said, no, not control, right? Well, I'm just going to say, control, yeah, it does come back to control, no doubt. But ultimately, it was about the standard system. And the thing about the standard system, you think about it, right, is everything they had, we built. Everything they had, we created. So even the standard that they had was really created by us because we built the standard. So the big homes that they had, all that stuff, we built. When all this stuff ended, we were the labor force. We could go out and build all those things to the sky, bigger, better, the whole thing. But what happened is after they burned us down, we didn't have the fortitude to go back and build it again. We were too afraid, and we didn't want to have to suffer it again, and we didn't have to do it. And not to mention, the laws didn't support us, right? So that took a lot of wind out of our sail. When I say the laws didn't support us, I mean, and I don't know if this goes into it, but we know that we didn't get to claim insurance, as an example. So we tried to claim insurance and build our stuff back based on the money we should get back from our insurance policies. We were denied. So how are we able now to go back and build our communities? We weren't. What we had to do, probably create tent cities, so on and so forth. And essentially what we really had to do was go back to them to be able to get our main necessities in life. And so we didn't have the jobs, we didn't have the communities, and so now we had to rely on them, which, like you said, Dr. Davis, was the control. And so now that they have the control over the food we eat, when we can get it, the door we got to go in to get it, the quality of it, everything, how they control it. I'm sorry. And so I think that's what you're trying to say, Dr. D, and I'll shut up now. I apologize.
If I may interject for a second, even then it said that we actually did rebuild them. We actually did reconstruct them. But then what they did, that goes to the question that I had in the chat. Their personal attacks and destroying is no longer being done that way. They're using other means and other vehicles in order to destroy and to keep us oppressed when it comes to these communities. Like
Well,
I
let
said,
me stop you for a second. Black Wall Street in Tulsa wasn't recreated, was it? They didn't rebuild that.
Yes, they did. Actually, they did.
Okay, see, I didn't see that part. So I need to learn about that part. I apologize.
Well, see, I had went and did further research. You know what I'm saying? And they actually did rebuild it, but they said what they tried to stop it by political and business leaders and doing rezoning laws enacted to prevent the reconstruction.
Okay, so they did rebuild it then.
Right, they said, but however, they were able to survive being a vital Black community until segregation. So that means they did rebuild it. They did. But what happened was whites seen that, no, we can burn it down, we can destroy it. But these people are so resilient that even though we didn't pay the claim, they was able to rebuild it.
Okay.
For one, because they had money. So they could rebuild it. Because remember back then, that's the old scenario. We keep our money in a shoebox. So it was just a matter of rebuilding. So that financially, they was wealthy enough to rebuild it.
Okay.
However, what they did when they realized that, know what, just destroying it ain't enough. We got to destroy from the inside. We got to destroy everything. So what we can do is we're going to get rid of segregation.
So in other words, I just want to add something to what you say. So when they couldn't beat you by physically destroying, they said what we'll do is we'll get in your head and we'll mentally destroy you.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll keep our foot on your back. And the only way we can do that is we got to bring you in. Instead of Muhammad going to the mountain came to Muhammad. We were the mountain. They didn't want to come to us, so they brought us to them with integration.
Sure. And
start throwing us into their schools and offering us jobs and all these different things. And us silly blacks chose the option.
Okay, so I'm going to unpack that just a tad bit. So physically, they burned down your building. They recognize that isn't going to work. So mentally, they say we have to break down your head.